All right, everyone, good evening. Welcome again to session one of our Living Foods journey. This meeting is open to everyone, and so it's open to people who are doing the Living Foods program, people who are not. And so as we always do, we'll have a presentation from our guest speaker tonight, and then we will open it up for questions, any questions that you all have. Welcome to everyone from the HeartSmarts family. Welcome to BBKH. Welcome to people from New York Presbyterian Hospital. Welcome to National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Bergen Passaic chapter, and to everyone else who's joining us, welcome. This is our Fall Heart Smart series, and we will be focusing on living foods, aka raw foods, but really focusing on the purpose of food for health and healing. This is a next step up from what we did in the summer with sprouting and growing our own food and all of that. And so I hope you all are excited. There is a subgroup of about 60 people who will be going fully raw in about 2 weeks. If you all want to wave to the camera so they can see who these brave, I'm one of them, brave people are. I went fully raw today so that if anything happened, Sam, I could tell you while we were on the meeting today, and nothing happened. I have some energy. I wore my green because I said we're going fully green. We're going there. And so I am ready for it. So this is energy after all day fruit, really. I didn't even eat much today. And so there you have it. All right, so let me tell you all how I met Sam, because you always know there's some story behind it. I went to my favorite place. Actually, no, Sam is not from Instagram. She's from YouTube. So on Saturday morning, I slept in late. So instead of waking up at 4 a.m., I woke up at 5 a.m. It's being a rebel. And I said, let me watch some videos because I have to assign homework for the HeartSmarts participants the next day. So let me watch some videos to see if I can get anything good. And I typed into the YouTube search, living foods expert. And this video came up from the Physicians Committee, the first video that came up, and it was about a story about an African-American woman talking about her grandmother and how her grandmother was really sick with diabetes and how watching her grandmother really inspired her. Watching the journey that her grandmother took and seeing all the struggles that her grandmother had inspired her to want to make some changes in her own life so that she didn't go down that same path. And I said, I wonder if she would be available to come speak, because one thing for sure that I want for us in this space, as we focus on health disparities in the African American community, it's always important to see someone who looks like us, who's doing the thing. And so I went on Sam's website and I sent her an email at 5 a.m., I think 6 a.m., and she responded at 7 a.m. And I said, this is my kind of person on a Saturday morning. And then we planned to speak that day. And I was just like, that's so awesome. I feel like we're kindred spirits. And so we spoke Saturday afternoon, planned all of this. So it's at like 4 days ago. And so here we are. I think that deserves a round of applause. Right. So welcome, Sam. Sam is a raw foods expert, living foods expert. She's a certified integrative nutrition coach, and she's a lot of other things as well. And she's going to tell you all about that. So I am going to go off screen. If you all have any questions, put them in the chat and I will ask her after. So she's going to present for about 45 minutes. For the people who are in the raw foods group in HeartSmarts, after this meeting is over, you're going to get a separate Zoom link and we're going to have our private meeting to check in for this week. So that's not going to happen on this call because this is open to everyone, but you're going to get another link. I didn't want to send them at the same time to confuse you. So maybe around like 7:45, 8 o'clock, you'll see another Zoom link in your email for our check-in meeting. All right? All right. Welcome, Sam. You can come off mute and I'm going to go away.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Tettey. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you all. All of you are friends, my new best friends, because we're all into the same thing. We're all into healthy living and clean eating, and I'm so excited for you on your journey. As Dr. Tettey mentioned, I am a certified integrative nutrition coach and brain health licensed trainer. And how I got to this space, like, why am I here talking to you? Well, back in the day when I was a little youngin', I grew up in Queens, New York. my family is from Jamaica, West Indies. I'm first generation Jamaican American. And I lived in a home with my mom and dad, my grandma, my mom's mom, and my brother. And my brother's like 11 years older than me. So I remember like around when I turned like 8 and 9, around there, my grandmother was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And our whole house changed at that point with her diagnosis. Once she was diagnosed, my mom had to do a nutrition class or something with the American Diabetes Association. She was given, a protocol of what she should eat, what she can eat, what she cannot, now that she has type 2 diabetes. And the whole house went on a dietary change at that point. Why? Because my mom owned a business, she had kids, she had a husband, and she didn't have time to make meals for everybody in the house. So everyone was basically eating like how she was taught. Plus, my mom was pretty much, the standard health conscious. Like we used to, work out and do Pilates together in the living room and stuff like this. Once my grandma was diagnosed, though, she got really serious about like cutting the fat off of chicken and pork chops and stuff. And she wouldn't just cut the fat off. She would cut it off and show it to me. Right? She would put it in the freezer. She look at all this fat I got off. It was really disgusting, but it was a really good learning lesson. And so throughout my whole like teenage experience, there were times I wanted to go out with friends and do all the social stuff, but I couldn't because I had to be home to take care of grandma. Grandma had to eat at certain times so she could take her medication at certain times. And at the time, I remember being pretty annoyed by this, that I had to stay home and be responsible for all of this. But, I love my grandma and I cared about her, and someone had to be there to do it, right? So 2004, I get into my dream school, which was NYU. That's like the only goal I ever had in life, was to get into NYU. And I applied early admission and got in. And the first person I ran to celebrate was grandma. She celebrated with me. My grandma was, and I always get emotional talking about her because she was such an amazing, amazing light. She was just really a really great teacher, and she taught in a way where she didn't speak the lesson. She showed the lesson. She was the lesson. Her life was the lesson. And there's many legacies to her life. I'm only sharing with you one piece of it that was a big lesson for me, but there were many other lessons. But she was well loved, and we celebrated. There was a point, though, where 2004, where and just give me a moment, where I noticed that her big toe had turned black. And it was a really, really scary moment, because this is the worst thing that you want to see on someone who has type 2 diabetes. We're warned about this. I knew how bad this could be, right? I thought that she would have to get her toe amputated, maybe her foot, maybe her leg, depending on how bad. I've seen the images on TV. But we never got to that point, because 2 weeks after that, she was dead. So basically, once we recognized that her toe turned black, she was rushed to the hospital. She was in the hospital for a while, but she was 86 years old. And I guess the doctors decided that nothing else could be done for her at that point. And so she was sent home on hospice care. And that part, the hospice care part, she was at home in our living room on a gurney. And she was hooked up to a catheter, and all of the family, my grandma had 8 children, all of them had kids. So at the time of her death, she had like 17, 19 grandkids and a great grand. And everyone flew in from everywhere to be with her in those last days. And I'm emotional just because I remember it. Every time I tell the story, it's like I'm right back there. She was in so much pain from the catheter. It burned her. She was really loud about it. Like, she yelled in pain. And I remember the time because it was, I was home from school my first semester. It was around before Thanksgiving. And it was like midterm season. So I remember being upstairs with my cousin, trying to focus on studying, and her just yelling in pain downstairs. And, understanding that, that this, was the last time we would be able to, spend time with her. Sorry. But anyway, in that moment, I realized that food was not worth it, because I knew that the reason she was in this situation was because of food. And so it was just so traumatic for me to see someone I love so much go through so much pain in such a long, drawn out manner. And I made a decision right then and there that, food is not worth it. But at the same time, I only knew what I knew at that moment. We knew what the doctors told us to feed her. And so that's how we ate. So at that time, when I say we, I mean my mom and I, because we're definitely partners in this whole thing, right? My mom definitely had way more responsibility in terms of like organizing the home health aid and all of this stuff, her medication and things like this. But at that time, it was like we knew, okay, whole grain bread, don't eat the fat, right? Cut the fat off. And my mom was really good at that, like basic stuff. But she was eating, my grandma was basically eating still the standard American diet with a Jamaican flair, right? We cleaned up all the stuff, a lot of Jamaican meals, oxtails. We didn't have too many oxtails at that point. That would have been like a treat because there's a lot of fat on oxtails. It's really hard to take the fat off of that. Patties, grandma wasn't having any patties, but we could have, patties. That was something that we would buy outside at that time. But grandma wasn't having that. But like her meals at that time were basically like toast of bread with orange juice, turkey bacon, because turkey bacon is healthier than regular bacon, right? That was our understanding at that time. So anyway, that's 2004. 2008 now, I graduate from school, I get married, and I move to the Bay Area. And I'm newly married, so I'm trying to do the wifey thing and make my husband a meal. And I decided to make him, the first meal that I would make him is something my mom made that I really enjoyed, honey glazed chicken. Okay, so I called my mom, asked her for the recipe, asked her to walk me through it. I spent a lot of time preparing this meal because as a youth, I really wasn't a cook, right? I didn't cook, I baked. And baking, you follow directions, and when you ask the Jamaican for a recipe, teach me how to do this. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? My mom, she does not do measurements, right? You just get inspiration from the ancestors on how much to put in the food. So anyway, it was really an interesting tutorial from my mom making this dish. But I get to the end of it. I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's pretty good. And I turn around and say, honey, I made dinner. And he's like, I'm not eating chicken. I'm vegan now. And I'm like, vegan? What you mean you vegan? Like, how about be vegan tomorrow? I just spent hours on this dish. I was really upset about it because it was a big deal making this dish. But he sat me down and we watched some videos together on YouTube. And there was one video that I remember. I don't remember the guy who was the speaker on the video, but I think he was like an anthropologist or something like that. I just remember there were huge segments of the video on YouTube where he's talking in front of an audience, like maybe at a university or something like this. And he was pretty much breaking down that humans are not carnivores because our intestines are long and they're windy. And because they have all these crevices and they're so windy, we're getting sick from eating meat, right? When a carnivore eats meat, they have a straight intestines. It's pretty short, right? Think about a lion or something like this. And so the transit time of the meat, it goes in, it goes out. And for us, it's like getting stuck and staying in there. It's getting calcified. And so this is what's manifesting into cancer for us. This made so much sense to me. I was like, oh, that makes sense, So that's when I jumped down the bunny hole of really like nutrition science. Prior to then, like I said, my mom and I, we would do Pilates at home. I was a huge fan of Beachbody. I worked out in college. I was at the gym all the time. Not that it made a big difference in my weight, but I was under that mental indoctrination, exercise, the fat away to stay in shape and all this stuff. That to me was healthy living at that time. So now, since I'm put onto this whole thing about, okay, we're not supposed to eat meat, that makes sense. I start to find books and I start to dive into some books. One of those books was Dr. Neil Barnard's program for reversing diabetes. Now, of course, when I saw the title, I had to grab it and read it because it's like, my grandma died from this, like pretty recently. Like, honestly, my grandma passed away in 2004 and I'm still getting emotional over it. You know what I'm saying? That grief and trauma of losing someone you love so much in such a horrible way, right? When they're having to experience pain in such a long, drawn out manner, it stays with you. So I pick up this book and I am just like, I go through a whole range of emotions with this book because one, I'm like, oh, how come they never told us? How come the doctors never told us this? Like, I learned in the book that the foods we were feeding my grandma was basically so her pills worked. She was on metformin, she was on Plavix, she had type 2 diabetes and all the co-conditions. So she had like 17, 19 pills that she was taking on a daily basis, okay? And she hated doing that. Like, I watched my grandma be a human pincushion for the medical system. Every time she took a pill, she would pull down her chin just to get all the pills down, right? It was not an enjoyable experience even leading up to the end. And it made sense what he was saying because I watched her, like, we fed her the foods. She was on those meds, eating the way we were trained by them, the doctors, nutritionists, to feed her. And then eventually it escalated to where she had to get insulin shots in her belly. Okay. So just to pause here, because at the time, when my grandma was alive, I didn't have this understanding, but prior to the insulin injections in her stomach, her pancreas is working. So basically how type 2 diabetes works, what you learn in this book is that when you consume anything that has sugar, right? It could be candy, it could be juice, it could be fruit, it could be a sweet potato, whatever. The pancreas releases insulin, right? It goes after the sugar in the bloodstream and it tries to put it into the muscle cells. But if the muscle cells are blocked and clogged up with saturated fat, it can't get in. So the sugar ends up staying in the bloodstream, right? So the foods we were feeding my grandma, it was staying there. And what did they have us do? They basically had us check her blood every morning. So she had to get pricked in the finger every morning. And then eventually she had to get the long insulin shots into her belly. So now at this point, now her pancreas is shot. The pancreas is not producing the insulin. So now we have to inject the insulin, right? So it's a degradation of her body happening over time where the medications are not helping. if anything, the medications are working against her. That's what ended up happening in the end, because the kidneys, the liver, it has to filter all of these things, right? And this is not an anti-medication talk, obviously, but when you know something can be reversed and you're not told, you know, it's like, I feel betrayed. You know what I'm saying? That's the emotions I was feeling at that point. Informed consent means give us the information so we can help, we can reverse, you know, give us that option. But you know, it's possible these folks didn't know, which is why I'm a huge advocate and very passionate about our healthcare workers, practitioners, doctors, nurses, all of them getting educated on plant-based nutrition. So I read Dr. Neil Barnard's book, and I'm going through all this like anger and like resentment. But then at the same time, you know, happy for the knowledge from myself, because now I can avoid what she went through. So I decided to give up meat, dairy, eggs. There was, you know, a meal that I was really loving at the time, which, you know, I'm at that time, I'm living in the Bay Area. I'm walking distance from Whole Foods, walking distance from Trader Joe's. And Whole Foods had this, what was it? Like a buffalo hot wing type of thing. You know how they have the hot bar, they had these chicken wings with this buffalo sauce on it or something like this. And I really, really loved it. Like I was eating it a lot. And so when I decided to go vegan, I had a last like ceremonial meal with this. And I remember the day my husband sat across from me. He just watched me, and I just took my time. I took twice as long eating it that time than prior times, because I knew it would be the last time. And I spent 2 weeks after that as a vegetarian, and 15 years later, I have not touched meat, dairy, eggs. So honestly, if I could do it, you could do it. I used to say while my grandma was still, you know, before the insulin injections in her stomach, my cousin, my older cousin, actually the same cousin in the story where, you know, he was with me upstairs while I'm doing my homework and grandma's crying out in pain. Like we're like almost like brother and sister, because we've, you know, been so close. But he stopped eating meat a long time. Like he was not eating meat even while she was going through this. And because he was having his own health issues of physical pain in his stomach. And I used to make fun of him all the time. I used to say, and he was actually born in Jamaica, right? I used to say, if it don't have chicken, it's not a meal, you know? And so I know, like I've been on both sides of it. The one that's just saying stupid, ignorant stuff, and the one that is like on the other side of, you know, 15 years later, being on this lifestyle. Some things that worked in my favor too, like I said, at the time when I became vegan, I was walking distance from Whole Foods, walking distance from Trader Joe's. I was in the Bay Area. At the time, there was a restaurant called Cafe Gratitude that only sold raw vegan entrees. And so they were part of the beginning of my journey, because right after Dr. Neil Barnard's book, I'm getting into Joel Fuhrman's book and all these folks. I find out, you know, go to Cafe Gratitude, and then I start getting into raw foods, and I start reading books by Sarma, who had a raw restaurant in Manhattan, Pure Food and Wine. Matthew Kenny was her co-owner and the chef. Annie Fio, who had like Asian style raw cuisine. You know, I got those books, and I was, you know, starting my journey basically. And at the time of the beginning of this vegan journey, I did not like vegetables. So you could just imagine what happened to me. I went vegan, had a lot of bread, a lot of pasta, and I gained 20 pounds. I got to the heaviest I had ever been at that point. And so I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to scale something back, and I knew vegetables were the key. So I decided to incorporate greens into my smoothie. I started with green smoothies because I knew I liked mangoes. I knew I liked other fruits. And so I just added kale and spinach and did a green smoothie. And that's how it all started, in terms of really, really getting into like the raw foods and getting into high raw. Got a juicer around that time and started juicing. And it was a really, really fun journey. And it has been so far because, you know, as a youth, I swore I didn't like a lot of stuff. I swore I didn't like avocados because they were green. I didn't even try avocados. I just swore I didn't like it because it was green, and a whole bunch of other foods. You know, I swore I wouldn't like. Some of them I tried, some of them I didn't try. But at this point, you know, I'm trying all of these new foods. And now we know from nutrition science on the microbiome, you know, the diversity of plant material, plant fibers are really great for the trillions of microbes living inside of our gut, right? So it's been an amazing, amazing journey, getting in the diversity of these plants, feeling the energy from raw foods, right? But the thing that keeps me honest with it is really acid reflux. Acid reflux is something even my mom dealt with. And because I switched over in my diet, you know, when you become vegan, you want to tell everybody about it. Like, oh my God. And the moment I read Dr. Neil Barnard's book, I had to share it with my mom because it was like, yo, how come the doctor never mentioned this? Like, look at this, you know? And so I shared it with her, and it was impactful for her too, because then she started to move more into plant-based eating. And she noticed that not having dairy ice cream, she could go to sleep without any digestive upset. No more acid reflux, right? And because she had that experience physically within herself, she's been able to maintain it and even grow from there, being completely now 100% plants, right? For me personally, it's the same, but I have to be raw because there's certain plant foods that are really healthy for us, that I cannot digest without raw foods. And so it keeps me honest because when I eat these foods, I get burning in my esophagus. And I remember in school, and this is a shout out to NYU for their great core curriculum, but not everybody's going to walk away with the same aha that I did. But there's a core course that everyone has to take at the College of Arts and Sciences called Human Genetics. And I had a professor, not vegan, I'm pretty sure he wasn't vegan, but I remember he shared that his colleague, right, who was also a professor, they had to move his stomach all the way up into his chest because he was popping back Pepto-Bismol like water. He had such bad acid reflux and he never did anything about it other than drinking down the Pepto-Bismol. And what ended up happening was he developed esophageal cancer. They had to move the stomach up. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So I always had that story in my head, right? And so when I was feeling this burning in my chest, I was like, oh no, we got to do something about this because I'm not about to undergo surgery and have my stomach moved, you know? But you know, I don't know if you remember those times. I remember growing up in the 90s, like Tums. Of course we had it in our home, you know, after every Thanksgiving meal, every Christmas meal with the family, people are knocking back Tums. That was just a regular thing, you know. No one ever really thought the consequences of those things. But raw foods helps me with this, right? And you know, of course you have challenges when you're used to a certain thing. You have cravings for those things, right? And it's really, I would say it's not even you having those cravings, because what we know based on the science right now is that the bacteria in our stomach, right, sends neurotransmitters to the brain. Neurotransmitters, I basically relate them to messages that tell us what we want to eat. So if the bacteria thrives on things we used to have that aren't really good for us, it will send those messages, hey, you're craving this, you're craving this, you're craving this, even though you have already mentally decided not to eat that thing anymore, right? And so for me, it was cereal. Cereal was really hard for me to stop eating because it was such a huge piece of my childhood. So growing up, and I feel like this is probably really specific to growing up in a Jamaican household or maybe a West Indian household too, is that, you know, you do a hot breakfast in the morning, right? We have to, and breakfast is the most important meal. You do a hot breakfast. So I had cereals though. I had like, you know, Honey Nut O's, Honey Nut Cheerios, Frosted Flakes, that type of thing. But I would use hot milk. And, you know, funny thing is, I used to drink Lactaid. So there was an understanding that I was lactose intolerant, but it didn't stop me from eating pizza pockets and taquitos and all of this stuff. So clearly there was some kind of cognitive dissonance there. But, you know, I was used to having in my childhood, which was a very happy childhood, you know, full of love and warmth. Like I said, I grew up with my grandma. My grandma had so many kids and so many grandchildren and her birthday was on Christmas. So every year the whole family would gather at our home to celebrate her birth, celebrate Jesus Christ, you know, and Christmas time. And I had a lot of wonderful memories enmeshed with this sweet, warm flavor of cereal. And so because I know logically that the refined sugar is no good for me, I knew I had to get off of it. And so there were strategies that I had to use to do that. Same thing with chips, you know, later on after I got off the cereal, chips, the saltiness from chips I was feeling. And now more recently, it's been sweet potatoes, which, you know, and I'll let you know how I got off of these things. So let me just backtrack with the cereal. How I was able to get off cereal basically is doing a water fast, a 24-hour water fast to not just get off cereal, but all grains. I was trying to get off breads, and it helped me get off cereals as well with the water fast for just 24 hours to clean my palate and start fresh. And so that's how I was able to get off cereal. With chips, I realized the salt was what I was really craving in the chips. And so I just started to add more salt to my foods. You know, I grew up in a home where my mom really just kind of like, she was under the impression that salt was no good. So we did very little to no salt. And so I kind of had that feeling too, like salt is no good and that type of thing. But I knew that if I wanted to, it's like, do I do processed food or do I do salt? And so let me just do the salt to get over the processed food. And that's how I got off the chips. Now, sweet potatoes was more of a recent thing, like probably in the last, I don't know, couple years or so. Environmental Working Group was ringing the alarm that mothers should not feed their babies sweet potatoes. And apparently, you know, once the babies, I guess, past weaning, they have some soft foods for them that they use actual whole sweet potatoes in. But there was concern because it's a root vegetable. It absorbs, it's been absorbing lead from the soil. And there's a lot of things going on with our soil right now. And so they've been ringing the alarm. I shared the video even in my Facebook group with my community. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's not good for baby, it's not good for me. Because what I understand is that, yes, baby is a small body. It's a growing body. It's really toxic to have lead. With us as adults, you know, it's still toxic. It's just that we're being microdosed, you know. And so I don't want to be microdosed with this, because by the time I end up in my senior years, the damage it's going to do to my brain is going to cause me my independence and quality of life. And that's not something I'm willing to do. So I got off sweet potatoes. I just stopped eating it because I don't want to consume lead. And now the latest thing is beans. That's the next step. So I've been like on a high raw vegan journey for a period. I was 95, 97% raw, but got back into cooked foods because, you know, I considered, you know, things like sweet potatoes and beans and lentils and things to be healthy foods. But the reason why I'm moving away from beans really is because of actually a project that I'm working on right now that is set to launch at the end of October, where I'm working on a summit connecting nutrition's role to mental health. And I interviewed Dr. Iris Latham, and he has some really interesting things to say about starches. My mom has been, cautioning me a lot about starches. It's not like she doesn't eat it, but she had a really interesting viewpoint about it, especially being West Indian, growing up, she was born in 1952. So she knows of a time where they would use these foods to actually make starch to press the clothes and things like this. But I had the impression like, oh, this is just old nutrition science, new nutrition science says it's fine. But Dr. Iris Latham made some such great points that make sense based off of what I know now about how the body works, how the gut works, and how the brain works. And I'm like, yes, beans is the next one, cutting it out. So working my way through what I have in the cupboard and just getting rid of it. But and two, in terms of things like oxtails, because I know, like, in our community, there are foods that we love to eat. For my mom, right? So she doesn't eat that stuff anymore, but we were able to celebrate a vegan Thanksgiving. I forget if it was like, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago now at this point, and we made it vegan. I have yet to find a raw vegan version for oxtails, but there's definitely a raw vegan version of patties, and also quesadillas and empanadas. There's raw vegan versions of these things, and pierogies and all sorts of things. Like every culture basically has their version of a patty, and you can raw veganize it. So these types of transition foods, yes, it takes more time because now you're getting into the realm of not so much living foods, as Dr. Tettey mentioned, right? It's still raw, but living foods mentality is you're not really using the dehydrator. You want to keep the water in the food. These foods, you use a dehydrator to mimic crust and things like this, like if you're making a raw vegan pizza, you make the crust and you have to dehydrate it for hours. It's the same type of idea with these patties. In terms of like stress eating and emotional eating struggles, right? So I just want to touch on that before I wrap up and we can like go into questions. I've gone through this whole journey. I've gone through a mindset shift, right? And the first core understanding was watching my grandma and realizing, right, having that visceral experience and realizing that food is not worth this pain. We're only on earth for like a short moment. I want to enjoy it. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to suffer. And so with emotional eating, a lot of times I find, with my clients, we're eating for entertainment and not for nourishment. And food is meant for nourishment, right? Not for entertainment. So what does that mean then? If I am feeling like eating and I'm not hungry, then I need to find other ways to entertain myself or to soothe myself, to feed my soul, right? So I'm doing other things. I'm not using food as that emotional crutch, right? And so this is more of like a mindset game to make that differentiation. And also understanding too that I was a glutton, honestly. This was one of my first attractions to raw foods. It's like, oh, you could eat all you want. You don't have to count calories. You don't have to stop. You're not going to gain weight. You're going to lose the weight. What? I can eat everything? And yes, I was like, yes, I was a glutton. And glutton is one of the 7 deadly sins. And I consider myself a Christian. So, I've had to come to terms with this. Like, really, it's just, this whole thing is a spiritual journey as well. It's self-actualization that we're going on. So like I said, I utilize my fasting window to nourish my soul, meditation, sound healing, yoga, weightlifting sometimes, Netflix and chill without snacks, which took it's like a mental shift, right? We're used to watching and eating at the same time. At least that was my entire childhood, was watching TV and eating, right? And so to make that shift that, oh, I could watch something and not eat, that took practice. That took practice. That took coaching myself through the whole thing. Like anytime I'd feel like, I would want to chew on something right now, I just don't. I get into my show, you know? Um, Spending time with family also, and these types of things, like what I do in integrative nutrition, we call this stuff actually primary food. The food you eat is secondary. Primary food is having a great spiritual practice, having great relationships, like social relationships, harmonious family relationships, having a fulfilled career, having physical activity, regular physical activity that you enjoy. These things feed us on an energetic level. And so we receive energy from this and nourishment from this. And if you notice, even in your own life, you can do some journaling even around this, because I encourage all my clients to journal through this whole process. There's so many things we learn about ourselves on this journey. You see that it feeds you. You don't feel hungry. You were once hungry, but you do these things and you no longer feel hungry. Now, in terms of using food for emotional eating, I am not necessarily immune to this, right? So I will still end up in a situation where I have an argument or something, or someone says something I don't like, and all of a sudden I want sugar, right? I want something sweet. And my mind is just not on these other things, or I'm not in a position to do them or whatever. So I have my healthy go-tos for emotional eating. And they're things that it comforts me. And those things are like my smoothies with banana and almond butter. Like if it has these things, I feel comforted. Raw vegan brownies, right? And I made one recently with just 3 ingredients: walnuts, cacao powder, dates, and some cacao nibs, for topping. So 4 ingredients. And a chocolate coconut smoothie by Harmless Harvest. It is, oh my gosh, it transports me to the island, and I just go on just a mini vacation in that drink. And all that's in there is basically coconut meat, coconut water, and cacao powder, which we can all make, at home. So there are healthy ways to use food as emotional eating, but also explore ways to not use food for entertainment or emotional eating, because it's not going to solve anything. Whatever it is that's triggering wanting to eat, it's an opportunity for us to really explore that. And in terms of like coping with cooked food as a trigger, right? Like if you're going to events and you see cooked food around, and you're feeling like, oh, I want to eat that. I used to eat that and it used to taste good. Because that's what's happening, right? Because as you eat this way, you eat cleaner, your palate changes, your wants and needs change, right? So you may even taste that food and not even like it, definitely getting digestive upset. All of my clients, within the first 2 weeks of working with me, they're making changes and they're tasting food because someone brought something over, whatever, and they're getting sick. Because why? The gut bacteria has already changed. It's already like the bacteria that thrived on unhealthy food has starved off, died off. And the bacteria that thrives on the healthy stuff now doesn't want that food. So it rejects it, and you feel that, right? So your body actually is going to hold you accountable along the way. But also with these social events, the biggest thing is you want to stay full, so you don't get triggered by cooked food. So if you're going to an event, go full, right? Stay full. This whole journey, even when you're on your raw journey, there are ways to stay full. Eat tons of greens, have your smoothie. Don't worry about calorie counting in the beginning. Just eat till you're satisfied, right? Because especially if you have a lot of weight to lose, it's going to come off, no problem. And in terms of staying committed for the long haul, you got to know your why. I know my why. I have a strong why. And fear for me is a huge motivator. This thing that I watched my grandma go through was terrifying. She is brave for going through that. I don't ever want to go through that. That is my why, right? That like I feel it in myself. I would never do that to myself. That's number one. And number two, stay busy. Don't let food run your life. You're trying something new. So it's like everything right now, right? But eventually you'll get to a point where your diet will really become very simple and very easy. And there's more to life than food, right? So we don't have to let food run our life. Have a roster of foods that you like, that's easy for you to prepare, and just stay full on those things. Make it easy for yourself to do. If you bump up on a recipe that has a million ingredients, you have to drive 45 hour and a half to go get the stuff. Don't do that one. Do easier ones. Do ones with ingredients that are at your local store, which is why I love a living foods diet, because it's smoothies, it's salads, and I love those things. They taste good because I'm utilizing ingredients that I like, and they're quick to prepare. And so if you're a busy professional, you have kids or grandkids that you're watching, you don't want to spend too much time in the kitchen, most likely. And living foods is the easiest way to eat, and it's the healthiest for our bodies. And then, of course, you have the staples that live in your home at all times. And you know what those are, right? For me, like I mentioned, fruits, I always have to have fruits on hand. Almond butter, need to have that, on hand. And, like with my smoothie, I like to do flax seeds, of course, on a daily basis. I have my staples. So I make sure my home always has those things. So yes, I'm open for any questions. I don't want to go on too long. I'm pretty sure some of you have some questions about the journey, and I'd love to answer some of those now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing your story and giving us some background about the Living Foods lifestyle. I want to ask everyone before we get into the Q&A with you. You said that food is not worth this pain, and I think that's such a powerful statement. So I want to ask everyone in attendance, what pain is it not worth to you? So Sam said food is not worth this pain, and I want you to type in the chat, worth what pain? So what is the pain that you have that you are now thinking that food is not worth this? So what is this for you? For me, it's low energy. What was interesting today, I was driving home from campus and I was hungry. And so what am I gonna do? Because I want to do the raw foods thing. And so I went to Whole Foods and I bought the packaged fruit that they had so that I could eat it in the car, the fresh cut fruit, and eat it coming home. And then after about 10 minutes of eating that, I felt fine and I had energy. And I said to myself, had you had something cooked, you would probably be sleepy right now, tired or something like that. And so that was an aha moment for me. And then breaking that habit of eating for pleasure or getting something because now I'm hungry and I have to eat whatever thing it is. And interestingly enough, because I ate that way today, I'm not craving anything right now. Whereas perhaps if I ate something else earlier, I'd be thinking about now what's for dinner and all of that. So it's an interesting cycle that happens with the cooked food. And so that brings me to my first question. What is wrong with cooked food? So for people here who are just hearing about living foods, raw foods, and they're like, what are you talking about? What's wrong with cooked food or cooking food?
Yeah. So when we cook food, so our body, right? There's a lot of metabolic functions happening. Our brain is the most metabolically hungry organ of our body, consuming 60% of our calories, right? This is how much this brain power, the stuff between our ears, really needs from us to really like feed it the best. And for all of these metabolic functions to happen, I mean, this stuff is going on all the time. Our breathing, our kidneys working, our liver working, digestion. We don't feel these things, and that's a good thing. That's what I learned from my grandma's experience. If I feel something, something is wrong. Okay. The fact that I don't feel it, thank God, But this stuff is working 24/7, right? In order for these metabolic processes to happen, they need enzymes to make it happen. Where do we get the enzymes? The body produces some, and the foods, the raw foods, give us the rest, right? So raw foods have enzymes, and enzymes are really sensitive to heat. So once you heat the food above 118 degrees, and yes, your oven does not go that low, okay? oven, bacon, steam and boil, it doesn't go that low. Once you cook above 118 degrees, you kill the enzymes. This is where, for me, it becomes an issue because that's why I have digestive upset. After the age of 30, you start to lose a lot of the enzymes that your body already has inside. You start to lose those things. There are other things that you're losing too that we have to be mindful of in our lifestyle practice to fortify so we don't lose them. But the enzymes is one. And so instead of me pulling from my body stores, I eat food that can digest itself, and the raw food is coming with its enzymes to digest itself. And so I don't have any digestive issues. And that's really the big thing for me. But because of that, people are having such great testimonials from raw foods in a lot of different other ways. But for me, that's the big one with the enzymes.
Okay, great. And so thinking about when you first started the fully raw or mostly raw lifestyle, what physical changes perhaps did you see? Was it things in your skin or energy level, or like what were the direct effects that you saw pretty quickly or over time as you were on it?
Yes. So in the beginning with the green smoothies, excitement. Excitement because I'm trying all of these new things. And you see fruits, they're colorful, they're juicy, and it makes you happy to see that color. And there's a biological reason why. It's because it's our species specific food, right? That's another thing. Another point to what I mentioned earlier with this anthropologist making the distinction between us and carnivores, right? Carnivores do not see color. We see color. We're attracted to color. We're naturally attracted to the fruit, and the fruit is sweet. We like sweet, right? A carnivore doesn't care about sweet, right? We like sweet. So it's our species specific diet. And so the color makes us happy. The food itself, just looking at it though, and eating food is a five senses, is full sensory experience, right? You have the sight, the smell, the touch, the taste, all of these things, right? And so in the beginning, because of all these things, you have excitement, you're trying something new, you're trying these new foods. And that I remember that time being really fun. At the period now, I was 97, 98% raw. I got to the skinniest I had ever been, and I was still within my healthy weight range. At that time, I was pretty active, though. Not active as in really working out. I mean, I've always tried to get to the gym, but at this time, I had the store. And so a lot of the movements I was doing was basically natural movement. So I would have 40-pound boxes of bananas or celery and things like that I'm picking up. And so there's squats involved, right? I'm just naturally doing squats in my day. And on my feet, for a lot of the day, and eating a lot of actually gourmet stuff because that's what we provided. And my whole life revolved around the store. When you own a food business, that is your life. So I would start my day with a green juice, and then I would have a smoothie for lunch, and then a salad for dinner. And the salad, so it's very much living foods because I'm not really into the more denser dehydrated things, just from a flavor texture perspective. But the salad that I really gravitated towards, that I had frequently, was on a daily basis, because I'm one of those, when I like something, I tend to keep eating that thing all the time. And the dressing had cashews in it, so it had fat, it had salt, all the things that we're attracted to naturally. Like the fast food companies, they know we like fat, sugar, and salt, right? But there's healthy ways to get that in, so you are just as much craving the healthier stuff. And that was pretty much my diet. So just with being on my feet, managing the store, and eating that food, I got down to 115 pounds, and I'm 5'3". So just to put it into perspective for you all, at 5'3" as a woman, and I go by the Rush University, Rush Medical Center in Chicago. They have a chart. It's available online for free. of your height and your weight ranges. This is according to the medical system, what they consider to be healthy. And so I believe it's like 110 to 140 is my range for my height, and I got down to 115. And yeah, I looked great and I felt great.
Awesome. All right. So you spoke about your grandmother, and as I shared in the beginning, that's what drew me to your story as well. And I think we can all relate to that story, or most of us can, of seeing a loved one suffer because of lifestyle choices perhaps that they had made, and also misinformation. I think about my
Mhm.
dad who passed away a few years ago, and towards the end, it was just terrible to the point where they had to put a trach in his throat, and he couldn't speak, and all this vibrant Caribbean man was couldn't do anything. But I think about his lifestyle choices and the foods we ate and the cans of corned beef, this and the ribs that, and all of that led up to that point. And so I want everyone to put in the chat who that person is for them. Who is the person that you saw go through what Sam's grandmother went through? So like I said, for me, it was my dad. Who was it for you that kind of demonstrates for you what can happen um, when you follow the standard American diet or the standard pretty much unhealthy diet from whatever place that your family is from? And so with that being said, Sam, I want to talk about food addiction. So there are people who
Mhm.
are listening to you, and it sounds like, I said I didn't want it anymore, and I stopped having it. And there are people in this meeting who have tried and tried and tried, and it keeps calling them, whatever it is, whether it's sugar, whether it's meat, they can't shake it. And so, do you think there is a such thing as food addiction similar to drug addiction? And if so, what are some ways to deal with that as we move into this living food space?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, foods they have it has a dopamine response in the brain, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard about this, which is that's like the feel good hormone, right? So, like when I tell you the story about cereal, that was it for me. I used to say it felt like getting a hug from the inside because it really felt like that. The sweetness with the warmth. I mean, it just encapsulated in a food experience my entire childhood, and the love and just the good times, the feel good moments, and to have all of that wrapped up in an unhealthy food, it's it's a whole thing. It's a mindset journey. But, I had an experience too of like what sugar was doing to me. I was having issues with anxiety, right? Which I'm pretty sure there's some kind of, um genetic predisposition, like where we have a genetic predisposition to certain things, but it's kind of like you have those epigenetic factors where your lifestyle can make or break the difference in how this manifests for you, right? So, and each of us are given a different thing, a different challenge we have, right? So for me, because in my family, we tend to be rounder. We have to be cautious about how we eat. We're very sensitive to sweets, sugars, and things like this. So being more on the insulin sensitive type of lifestyle eating is really important for us, but also anxiety. Like, the women in my family tend to be really high strung. And I'm pretty sure there's like some ancestral things with that. And so I found that sugar was making me like inside, I just felt like anxious, and I didn't like the way I felt. I didn't like the way I felt. It was really scary. And I put post-its all around my apartment that said, "You cannot afford to eat sugar." That's what I was putting, 'cause I thought I was having a mental breakdown, like the way I was feeling. And that's how I was able to get off of it because of how I felt. So I made a decision. I wrote it down to remind myself everywhere, right? In the apartment on post-it notes. And so when I go to the store, I have a shopping list. The person who identifies as a health conscious person makes this shopping list. When I get to the store, I'm in and out. I'm not going into the aisles that have nothing for me. Even if I feel like it, I just have to keep blinders on, right? You're in the produce aisle and you're out, right? This really helps a lot. Like just don't give your mind time to really start with this whole, should I treat myself? Should I not treat? It's like, no, I have my list in, out. That's number one. Number two, associations. My mom was able to get off sugar because her sister told her that sugar crumbles your bones, right? Turns it into dust, right? So whatever I'm pretty sure, sugar hurts our bones. It does a lot of things to our body, but the visual of it really messed with my mom, and that's what got her off sugar. She was a sugar addict before that point. The same thing with meat and dairy for me. I used to get, like I told you, I grew up in Queens, New York. I used to get a cold like clockwork 4 times a year, and it was really bad with lots of mucus and like bad, like it was yellow and green, like really bad, right? And now when I see cheese, because I know cheese is inflammatory and causes mucus, when I see cheese, even those commercials with the pizza and they're pulling it and all this, all I see now is mucus. All I see is mucus. With the animals, all I see is dead flesh. And why would I put rotten, dead flesh inside of me? So it's about really looking at this stuff is not food. There's a lot of things in our grocery store they call food. It's not food. It's not for human consumption, And so once you make that relationship in your head, either from your personal experience, what you feel, right, when you consume these foods, or just what you know to be true about these foods, then you can get off of it. And then your body, like I said, will keep you accountable because your palate will change, your gut bugs will change. So you'll start to crave and like the healthier stuff and not the harmful stuff.
Excellent. So I want everyone, if you can, if this is an issue for you, not being able to let go of certain foods, I want you to share it with the group so that you've spoken it out loud so that we can hold you in our thoughts of releasing this food from your life. So what is the thing that still has a hold on you? And so you can type it in the chat. What food that you know perhaps that you should not be having is still calling your name or something, and it's still impacting your life. And so, Sam, there are a bunch of questions. So we're going to go into like a lightning mode in a moment. But I want to ask
Okay.
you about the vegan, quote unquote, vegan foods. And I find it interesting that it seems like people are replacing the habits that they had with when they were eating meat and putting it into the vegan lifestyle. So they're not eating meat and there's some pride associated with that. But now they're creating these processed concoctions that are mimicking hamburgers and mimicking ribs and mimicking fried chicken and saying it's not meat. So they feel good about that. What are your thoughts about this kind of widening vegan movement, but it's not necessarily healthy food?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of confusion, especially with the word vegan. Vegan does not mean healthy. So I want to say that again for the people in the back. Vegan does not mean healthy. All those processed foods, those veganism has an agenda, and the agenda is to get folks off of meat. And there are a lot of great reasons why, right? Just from an environmental perspective, it's not sustainable. And so you'll find even lab grown meat coming onto the market now where they're using stem cells from certain animals to make some of this meat, because they're concerned about the environment, right? I got into this because of health. I'm the first animal that I'm concerned about, right? It's me. So, it's a different, this is like it's health here, veganism here. So identify first as a health conscious person. That's what I would say.
So eat to live and not live to eat, pretty much. But I think that still speaks to the addiction piece because people are getting whatever that fix is from this new plant-based. And Sister Maria Davis just put in the chat that slutty vegan is not healthy.
Yeah.
But that line
Yes.
usually is wrapped around the block, and that's the kind of food I'm talking about. They have the mock
Yeah.
oxtail, it does exist, the plant-based oxtail and all of that. And I'm just looking at it, it's just the same unhealthy fried, deep fried, and all of that.
Right. And it could be a transition thing. So like I said, when we had this vegan Thanksgiving celebration, my dad, right? So my dad, like I said, my mom makes all the meals for the home. And so my dad by default is a plant-based eater, not because he chose, but because he's not cooking, right? So, and also my mom takes care of my uncle now, who's going through a lot of health issues. And so they're all in the home together, right? It's like Three's Company, with except it's two guys and, and one woman. So we made this Thanksgiving vegan celebration with cooked vegan oxtails, all handmade. What did we use? King oyster mushrooms and rice paper, right? Which is like an Asian thing. And so you have to cook that. That's not raw. And we use celery inside for the bone, because the bone is important to hold the oxtail, right? Anyway, the dish came out great. Yes, you had to fry it, and my mom tried some different things with the air fryer, so you don't use oil. So we, experimented with this. But what happened out of that? It didn't change my mom to eating this type of food, right? She liked it, but I was like, oh, she don't have to eat it. It was a lot of work to put it together too. That's another thing. If you don't have time to be spending in the kitchen, you won't even really want it. Like, you'll have it the one time for an experiment, try it, get that craving out, but it takes so much time. It's not going to be a staple in your meal, right? So I wouldn't put too much stress on you. It's a transition thing. You're gonna get over it. Trust, it'll just be like a little bump in the road. But what ended up happening from that experience is that our meat eating men in the house now found something that they love. These are Jamaican men in their 70s, okay, that are now eating oxtails made from king oyster mushrooms and celery, okay? There's nowhere else where you would have that experience, So make it from scratch, make it at home. You don't need to buy the stuff out in the street, because when you make it at home, you can control what goes in there, But there is a value to this for the folks that aren't even aware that what they're eating is causing a problem. They're not conscious, because all of you here are aware of the problem, and you're aware of the solution, and you've decided to make a change, right? So you are 3 steps ahead of most people, right? So these types of dishes I find are a great bridge for folks who are still eating the standard Jamaican diet, the standard American diet, standard West Indian diet, whatever. It's really for them, to get them to a healthier spot, because we don't jump into 100%. Most people, don't jump into 100% raw overnight, unless you have a major health crisis and you have a strong will to live, because that's important. I know people in my family who don't have that strong will to live, and they're not willing to make a change or do anything. And that's more of like a psychological thing that needs to be addressed.
Excellent. So you mentioned intermittent fasting. Can you just talk about your view of that and how you incorporate that in your life?
Yeah, so this is really individual. So like when I coach with folks, we find out, what your chronotype is. They have a book out there, Eat for Your Blood Type. I say you should eat for your chronotype, because when you eat matters. Of course, what you eat matters, but when you eat is really important. And it's not the same for everybody. So for like my mom and I, and it tends to be, the chronotype tends to be genetic. So my mom and I are lions, right? And this is based off of a book by Michael Breus. Breus is the last name. He's a sleep specialist. And so he has, how you have like, oh, you're a night owl, or, they have like these bird things that we say with how we sleep, our sleep-wake cycles. But he has in his book, he's making correlations to actual mammals, because we're not birds, we're mammals, right? And so like lions, my mom and I are lions. So we're early risers and early to bed. And so for me and my mom, that means we are really hungry in the morning. So I intermittent fast, but I push my feasting window in the morning and end afternoon. So I tend to finish eating like 1:30, 2 o'clock. And so I'm fasting from 2 p.m. all the way, or 1:30 p.m. all the way to 5:30 a.m. when I wake up. This is what works for me. Why do I do it? Because not only is it great for your brain, great for your metabolic health, right? Your metabolic health really, really matters. After people get over like, oh, I want to lose weight, which is, you know, a lot of times it's vanity, because I think we shouldn't be focused really on weight. We need to be focused on body composition, because you want muscle mass. This will help you stay independent and have a quality of life later on in your older years. And water weight, there's not much you could do about that. The body's doing what it's going to do with that. But the fat, the excess fat, and sometimes we're not even seeing that fat. It's called visceral. It's wrapping our vital organs and stifling them. So we want to make sure that visceral fat is as low as possible, not too low, because we do need some fat on our body. There is good, healthy fat. But anyway, I intermittent fast because of, you know, the tons of benefits, but also on top of that, the digestive benefits. And I said to you earlier that I knew, I called myself, because I saw what was happening, a glutton. I called myself a glutton because I knew it. If I was on the seafood diet, I eat it, right? You know, like people offer me, you want it? Of course, you know, am I alive? Am I breathing? Of course I want that, you know? You know, I could eat anytime I could eat. You understand? I have a really good appetite. So the intermittent fasting basically just puts a line in the sand, like, okay, after this point, I don't eat. And what the benefits for me is that I get to focus on my water consumption to make sure I'm very well hydrated, because if I'm eating all the time, I'm not drinking. And a lot of the times we think we're hungry, it's actually we're thirsty. And the body needs water and the brain needs water, right? So if you have pain, muscle pain, brain fog, all this stuff, a lot of times it's dehydration. So that's number one. Number two, when I go to bed and lay down, I don't have digestive upset, right? Raw foods helps, but if you're on a high raw diet and your dinner is cooked food, there's still a potential, especially if you're using oil, there's still a potential for digestive upset. When you intermittent fast and stop your eating, given at least 3 hours before laying down, it helps a lot. And so for me, this is why I intermittent fast, and that's the major benefit for me, because I need those guardrails. Otherwise, I would eat myself out of house and home, even on a raw food diet.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I think what you're speaking to is really important. One, about being honest with ourselves about who we are and what we need to achieve these goals. So I am like you, when we do things like 30 days, I'm going to stick to it, because even if I'm not committing to myself, I'm committing to the HeartSmarts group. And so we're doing this thing, it's going to work for me. 30 days, we're doing intermittent fasting. My cutoff window is at 4 p.m. and that's it. So if that's the type of person that anyone in this meeting is, know that about yourself and create those kinds of parameters that will make it easier for you or more likely for you to succeed. There is a question about, what did you say, chronometer or chronotype, and how do you spell it?
Chronotype, exactly. Just like Kim Robinson put down here, chronotype. And it basically is your sleep cycle. Different people have different sleep cycles that are innate to them, not what we've been taught or trained to do, right? Because I know as a child, I was trained to wake up early, and, you know, my dad would wake up and go to work 5 a.m. in the morning and stuff like this. You know, the kids have to be in school a certain time. It's not what we're trained, but what's innate to us. And so in that book, he goes through all of this. I have in my household, for those who've read the book, I'm a lion, I have a dolphin in the house, and I have a wolf. And the wolf is up at 12, 1, 2 o'clock eating, okay? This is when the wolf feels really hungry. But obviously, this is not healthy to be on this type of cycle, because you shouldn't be eating at a time you should be sleeping, right? And when we sleep is important. When we eat is important, because the body is running on a circadian rhythm. And this also ties into your bowel movements, right? Once your eating gets into rhythm, your bowel movements get into a rhythm as well. So you are eliminating waste properly. We should be having regular waste elimination on a daily basis, so we're not keeping toxins in the body. So yeah, the name of the book is really long. I don't remember, but Michael Bruce, you'll find the book.
So Breus.
Breus, yeah.
Okay, so this is going to be the quicker answers if possible. What is the
Mhm.
digestion time difference between eating raw versus cooked food?
Ooh, that's great. I've heard 3 hours. Like it depends, even not even just raw versus cooked, but even what you're eating. So like a fruit takes about 30 minutes to digest. Some vegetables could take even longer. Cooked food, I think I heard like 3 hours, but depending if you're eating meat, it could be days, that the stuff is stuck in there and not coming out, which is why the gas is smelling so bad because it's putrefying in our intestines. Um, but yeah, that's basically it, which is why, there's certain techniques to clear the colon out, which is very beneficial to do. And, in the West Indian practice, they know that because my mom told me, every September before the kids go back to school, they have to do something called a washout. So they already know, our ancestors know,
Great. What about sprouts? Do you sprout?
Yeah. So
Wait,
I've had
before you answer that, I have to say, when Sam and I spoke on Saturday, told her about that we were sprouting, and then I said Doug Evans, and she said, "You know Doug," and I said, "You know Doug," and it was just an exciting moment because we love Doug over here. So anyway, go ahead.
Yes, The Power of One. Hey, Lakara. I know Lakara. Hey. Yeah, The Power of One by Michael Bruce. Very good book. Yes, Doug Evans, amazing, right? And I know you guys heard him speak. So he has me on a different level with sprouts. But yeah, when we had the store, we were sprouting. We had a sprout machine, and it takes a lot of energy, effort, and attention with this thing because you could grow mold and all this kind of stuff. But I buy sprouts from my local provider. They have sprouts at Whole Foods from a local company, and I add it to my meals. But when I recently interviewed Doug for this summit that I have coming up, the amount of calories he's telling me he's consuming from sprouts is just on a whole nother level. So yeah, I eat sprouts. I love sprouts. I think they're great. In the beginning of my vegan journey, I had wheatgrass, and that was a very powerful experience. I feel like I had too much at that moment and just threw up stuff I had the day before. I was like, oh, I am not digesting carrots. That's when I stopped eating carrots because I was like, how am I seeing this? Wheatgrass taught me that. but
It's so
but yeah, I
interesting that
love
you said
sprouts.
that, because Dr. Sabi talks about not eating carrots and that carrots, um, our bodies can't digest them. But then we'll see in other books that we should be eating carrots. So that's interesting that you just said that. All right,
And I think
so
different
mhm.
people have different experiences because my mom loves carrots, swears by it, especially carrot juice, which these were the actual whole pieces coming out of my mouth when I had the wheatgrass. So it's like I didn't chew it well and it didn't break down. But definitely if you're juicing, this quick absorption, so you don't have that kind of problem. But everybody's body is different. Even when it comes to healthy foods, there are foods that can be triggering. I saw someone in the chat mention, how do you do raw and you're allergic to nuts? You may have some of these allergies. I've heard of people being allergic to apples, which I was shocked. Like, how could you be allergic to apples? But it can happen, just because the microbiome for each one of us is so unique. It's as unique as our fingerprint, right? So just think about that. It's so unique because it's being affected by what you ate as a child, the people around you as a child, right? The people in our homes that we talk to on a day-to-day basis, we are exchanging bacteria with them, right? Which is why husband and wives tend to look like each other after a while. We're exchanging bacteria. Your dog, you're exchanging bacteria. Plant life, where you live in New York, I lived across the street from a parkway. All that stuff affected my microbiome. The foods that I ate, the people I was around, the environment and toxins around me, the products I use on my skin, all of that stuff affects our microbiome. So that chemical cocktail, you know, is so unique to each one of us that we will have different experiences even with healthy foods. And so there are just ways to work around that. That's why you work with a coach or a health professional to get into how you can eat those foods and what you need to do in the meantime until you build up that capacity.
And so you mentioned beans and that you've taken them out of your diet. So
In progress, yeah.
so the one question is why? Can you explain that more further? But another question is, um, how do you get the nutrients from raw foods that you would be getting from cooked foods like beans, mushrooms, and things like that?
Well, beans, mushrooms is one of those healthy foods that, again, I cannot digest, and they don't taste that great to me, and they're fungi. And so there's different um thought processes, logic, and conversation around this if we should even be eating fungi. Um, but we do know from Dr. Joel Furman it's cancer fighter, right? I feel like I don't necessarily need it. This is God in his infinite wisdom put so much plant food. We haven't even scratched the surface in our diet on what's available to eat. I don't really need the mushrooms. All of the stuff that it could give me, I'm getting from other sources. When it comes to beans, the primary focus is protein, right? And the biggest source of protein and the best source are greens, leafy greens. But on a raw vegan diet, you could get it from nuts, you could get it from seeds. Like I said, every morning, most mornings, I'm having my smoothie almond with almond butter in the morning. So I get my protein, I get my fat, but I have a huge salad every day. So I'm getting lots of protein. I've been able to build muscle eating this way. So I don't really have any concerns. So yeah, that's how you get it. Hopefully I didn't miss any part of the question.
Nope, that was great. Will there, in transitioning or being on a fully raw diet, will there be excessive gas? And if so, how should people deal with that?
The gas, yes. Because especially if you move from eating a diet that doesn't have that much fiber, meat, dairy, eggs has no fiber. And now you're eating plant foods that are full of fiber. And so your gut needs time to adjust, right? The bacteria that thrives on this fibrous food is going to need time to populate. So I follow the rule of Dr. Will Bulshewitz. He's a gastroenterologist, plant-based doctor. He says go low and slow. So with the foods that you're having issues with, you just start in low quantities and you build up from there. And for me personally, in the beginning, I had gas. Yeah, I had bloating and gas, but I didn't make it an issue. I just, I come from a gassy family anyway. It's so I was just used to like whatever. But intermittent fasting helps a lot. And as you go on and clean up your diet, everything starts to normalize. With the water fasting, even I've done coconut water fasting at one point when I was living in Chicago. Every Sunday, I would do a coconut water fast. I can't remember the logic behind why, but it was a really great experience. It just allowed my whole digestive system to rest. And I think the question you had asked me earlier too was why beans? Why get off beans? And so on the summit, Dr. Aris Latham, he talks about starches. And the big thing that made an impact for me is the whole thing, right? So once the summit releases, I'm sure Dr. Tettey will send out the link for all of you to watch it. But he makes a lot of points about starches. But the one that really got me was about what's happening in the gut and how it's creating alcohol. And I know how alcohol consumption affects the brain. And so for me, that's like, okay, it's not worth it for me, right? And beans takes a lot of time to prepare properly, right? Beans, you have to soak them overnight. So that's a lot of pre-planning. You could simplify your whole life, and a lot of times this is where the people are having problems with the gas with the beans. I've never heard of people having gas problems from kale or mixed green salad, because these are complex carbs, and Dr. Aris says complex is complicated, and so it's complicated for the body. Really interesting perspective, but that alcohol point and some of the other points he makes on the interview got me. So I'm just trying not to throw out all these beans that I have, because I order my beans, my dry stuff in bulk from Thrive Market to keep my costs low. So I have like a cupboard full, just like a shelf, you know. So I'm just gonna go through that, and that'll be the last time, because it's like the alcohol and the brain thing was just like, it's not worth it.
Do you eat overnight oats?
No, oatmeal has shown to put like, and I have actual data to prove that oatmeal makes me retain water. And why would the body retain water? I can only think it's an inflammatory response. Some cooked foods have an inflammatory response. Some people would say all cooked foods have an inflammatory response. I have always historically had this experience. If I have oatmeal Monday morning, Tuesday morning, all the way to Friday morning, by Friday, I have gained weight. I'm visibly looking more swollen. And it's because of water retention in the body. I think it tastes great, obviously, but I don't eat it and I don't use it.
What do you think about tea and broth?
So tea and broth. So with this whole thing, there are levels to the whole thing, right? So for folks right now, you're on your raw vegan journey. You want to be focused on raw. Now, when you're raw, so I'm going to talk to you from that perspective. Tea is fine and is great. Continue to drink that. Green tea is one of the best, great for the brain, has a lot of other benefits. And yeah, tea is great. Herbs are great. And of course, you can't extract the nourishment from the herbs unless you do a decoction or infusion, right? So it involves having some boiling water. The other thing you asked about, other than teas, was broths. In the raw food lifestyle, you don't do it. There's no need for it. You don't really make it. I mean, a broth, normally how you would make a cooked broth from scratch is by taking vegetables and boiling them. But on a raw food diet, you would take those vegetables and juice them. So, and we don't really call that broth. We just call it juice. So it's not relevant on this lifestyle.
So we're reading the book I shared with you, Raw Veganism Healing Diet. And in that book, the author says there is no need for multivitamins if you're doing the living foods diet correctly. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's lots of discussion we could have about that. You know, some folks have some really interesting thoughts on it. And I'm of the impression that there's more to the story with nutrition than nutrition. Like I said, as an integrative health practitioner, we get nourishment from things that are not food, which says a lot. And that spiritual piece is major, right? Like, honestly, literally, I would not even be here talking to you now if it wasn't for spiritual practice and herbs. My mom, as a young child, had an amazing healing testimony where she was so sick and the doctors didn't know what to do with her. She had boils on her skin, sores, her hair was thin and falling out. And this is in Catadupa, Jamaica, if anybody's familiar with St. James, Jamaica, like rural area, like out in, yeah, less than, you know, Andrea. So this is country, right? And her dad took her hair, chopped the hair off with a machete, put her in a bath with herbs, right, from the bush. Some church folk came over and prayed over her. And from that moment, she was healed. She went from having all these sores and thin hair to now having a thick head of hair. If anybody sees that interview you were talking about, you would see, or even my podcast, Raw Food Health Empowerment Podcast, she hosted it with me for like three years. Her hair is thick. She was a hairdresser, you know, healthy, beautiful skin, right? Vibrant. And so there's more to our health than food. There are some people, there's some yogis who are able to get nourishment on absolutely nothing, no food. So it kind of flies in the face of some of the nutrition knowledge we know right now. But if you are under the impression that you need food to survive, you have to eat food because our mind is just so powerful. And so for me, I'm not there. I'm not at the point where I personally can feel good, not eating and, doing intermittent fasting. Yes. Doing a coconut water fast, a water fast for 24 hours. I don't do water fast beyond 24 hours. It does not feel good to me at all. I'm not there yet, on my journey, on my mental journey, right? So at this place with a raw food lifestyle, I can eat and have great benefits, right? Um, but yeah, there's a lot more to this whole how our body works and things at play beyond food.
And what is your view on raw, unfiltered honey
I don't
in
eat
a raw
honey.
foods diet?
Yeah, I don't eat honey at all. What they doing to the bees, I just don't. And like I said, I got into this for my health, my personal health, not really as a vegan, but saying vegan just for the simplicity. So I don't have to tell people, oh, I don't eat meat. There, just so many words. So I would just say vegan. But I've been 15 years on this journey, and you change. Things change. Your diet is not the only thing that changed. Your spiritual growth changes. And also the things that I see going on in the food system, I am not okay with it. How these animals are being treated, I am not okay with it. And I think it says a lot about our humanity that we would make some of these decisions. Like, one of the most impactful books I read was Animal Factory by David Kirby, about the mad cow disease and how that started. They were feeding these cows. Cows are herbivores. They eat grass. They were feeding them dead cows. They're not carnivorous, number one, but they don't eat their own. You know what I'm saying? It's just so sick. Why would we do that? Um anyway, and what's happening to the bees is a no. From a health perspective and a brain perspective, if you're going to use a sweetener, the healthiest one is date syrup. It's just a whole food mixed with water. You get date syrup. You have less of a glycemic response that will affect the brain. So as far as honey goes, the best thing is date syrup. So I recommend that if you need a sweetener, that's what you should be using.
And so we'd like to know, what are they doing to the bees?
Basically, they're pimping them out. They have these bees that, so the way bees eat, right, the pollen, and then they go to all these different plants, and that's how the pollen gets mixed up, right, with all the stuff. This is how the plants grow and our whole ecosystem works. But they'll have these bees do their job in one area, capture them all, take them to another area, do their job. And it's really not healthy for the bees. They're getting disoriented. And it just feels like it's just, I don't want to use the word, slavery, because it's like, it's not the same, right, as what my ancestors have gone through, clearly. But I cannot help but feel some type of way about the same mindset that allowed this to happen. And even before then, we could talk about the Bible and biblical times, the Old Testament in particular, where just the way folks were being treated, this is not the type of world I want to live in. And so I just have a problem with it. It's just a personal thing. But from a health perspective, the honey, some people say it has medicinal benefits, but the glycemic response, the effect to the brain is not worth it, especially if you have date syrup.
Okay, and earlier you mentioned a Caribbean practice called a washout, and someone wants to know, what is that?
Yeah, that's basically where, before they send the kids back to school, they would give them something to drink, to take, to basically cleanse their inside. So, you go to school clean, not just on the outside, but on the inside as well, which is why I feel like, a lot of Caribbeans, they come to America and they'll do a detox. They don't have any problems doing a detox or like take some herbs for something, but it's a one-time thing. They're looking for a quick fix. But this is where you get yourself into trouble, because the way we stay healthy is with lifestyle change. When you do these quick fix things, you end up in a crisis, and sometimes things could escalate to where now you have to do something really, really out of the box than what you're used to. And it may be a struggle, or it may even be too late. And with some things, you don't even get a warning sign, like with a stroke. Stroke could happen one time and that's it, So I'm really a proponent and advocate for lifestyle change, but it's basically my ancestors' version of a detox. Yes.
Okay, great. And do you practice food combining? And if so, are there any quick and fast kind of food combining rules that you live by?
When it comes to raw foods, if you're doing 100% raw foods, I don't think there's too many things you need to worry about, especially living foods, right? And two, one of the main things to understand is within each food, you're having everything. So like when I said leafy greens has a ton of protein, you have fat and sugar in there as well. They're just in different quantities. Same thing with banana, so some of these issues that folks bring to mind, it's like, I'm not really sure. And if I don't have an experience, right, because there's data, right? And data always works on like a bell curve where there's the majority and then there's the outliers. I could be an outlier, This is why the way we eat has to be so individual. There's our species specific diet, but within there's a lot of variables. So we could fine tune what works for us. And so with 100% raw, anything goes. If you're doing high raw though, the main rule of thumb I tell folks is do not eat fruit as a dessert. You don't want to have fruit after cooked food because fruit digests so fast. It's digested in 30 minutes and the cooked food is taking longer. So it sits and it ferments. And this gives you gas and bloating, distension, which is really uncomfortable, and smelly gas. So if you share a bed with somebody, they are not going to be too happy with you. Okay. So save your marriage and don't eat fruit after cooked food.
Okay. And the last question, one of your areas of specialization has to do with brain health and connections to nutrition. Can you speak more about that?
Yes, our brain dictates everything we do. Everything we do, how we're showing up in community, how we are expressing ourselves to our loved ones, the decisions we're making, and I read a book by Dr. Daniel Amen called The End of Mental Illness that really changed how I think about the abolition movement, crimes in community, relationship, everything, community, just community, really great book. And the stories I've heard, how food can affect people in the womb and how that can cause them to end up being in prison for a long time. I mean, food can affect divorces, can cause divorces, right? That's how much what we eat and what we put on our bodies and the toxins around us can impact our lives in such tangible ways, right? Not just our cognitive abilities of being able to speak and remember. Yeah, like we want to speak and remember stuff, right? But beyond that, irritability, anger, because I've seen these things. I have personal experience with these things in my family where folks who are just such loving beings, all of a sudden started speaking in a way that was just really strange and really weird and very rude, disrespectful, anger, irritable, and all because of toxic stress. Toxic stress comes not just from our outside environment, but when we eat, we take the outside in. And that impacts our body. It's impacting our gut. It's impacting our brain. And it's affecting crime rates. It's affecting how we commune with each other and family. It's affecting our communities. And this is a big passion point of mine right now, is just advocating for this, because I feel like, especially every, voting season, election cycle, we're on this, crime. Well, if you care about crime, you need to focus on our food system, right? And subsidize organic fruits and vegetables, make this stuff affordable, accessible, bring in nutrition education into communities. The dialysis centers are in our communities so much, on every block, like a Starbucks or something like that. But we need fresh produce. We need organic produce. Organic produce, even in New York City, is so hard to come by. It's so hard to get. And it doesn't make sense. If we really care about crime, we need to be looking at our food. And I don't think many people are making that connection. And the reason why we know this so I'm an Amen trained Dr. Amen trained brain license trainer. And Dr. Amen, his Amen clinics, they do SPECT scans, which are scans where they can see blood flow in different areas of the brain. So, if you have a healthy brain, there's blood flow everywhere, lots of blood flow, not too much, not too little, right? And so we can tell from all the SPECT scans he's done and all the studies he's done that how we're being affected and what that's manifesting into. And he's had to be, he's been called many times to court to testify for a lot of criminal cases, and so there's just a lot of stories I know in regards to this. And one I could share if we have time. Do we have time for me to share one?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, so there's one that I talked about on my podcast about a young man named Kip. Okay, so I feel like I'm too young to really know this, but I feel like there may be some people in the room who may be familiar with this story. But this young man was, I'll cut to the chase. His uncle asked him, no, when he was young, he was acting in some strange ways, right? So he depression, I guess he was really depressed or something like this, and his grandmother was taking care of him, and so took him to the doctor. They put him on some medication. They diagnosed him with not just depression but ADD also, and put him on this medication. And before that point, he wasn't doing well in school, but now he could focus. His brain was working right, so he was doing good in school. But he decided not to take it. So he's 11, 12, he decides not to take the meds because he's like, why do I have to take meds? None of my peers are taking meds. So he stops taking it. Now, then he starts to have issues again. His uncle now comes to him and asks him to tag along to rob some women. So not only do they go and rob these women, but they rape these women. And now Kip ends up on trial, facing life in prison. But what we find out later is that he was a fetal alcohol baby. So basically his mom, when she was pregnant with him, was consuming alcohol. But I want to dig into that part with you too. But the alcohol not only messed up his brain, but when he was having issues as a young child, when he met with the doctor and the doctor put him on meds, that helped him. But he decided to come off, and then it manifested into this crime. But as I look back to this whole story, it was like, why was this pregnant woman even consuming alcohol? A lot of time, now I've never been pregnant, right? I've never had a child. So y'all could teach me, okay, on this call. But from what I know is that typically women find out they're pregnant after some weeks, right? So the baby has already started growing. Critical parts, right? Including some of those brain cells. And so if we're having a lifestyle of drinking and we're getting pregnant, we're actually finding out too late that we should have stopped drinking, and this is how it manifested for this young man. This young man is spending life in prison, and, people would be like, he deserved that. He raped 2 women. And I would say this boy was never even really given a chance at a healthy, fruitful life from the moment he was born, because of his mom lacking awareness. She was dealing with whatever she was dealing with. But there are too many of us who normalize alcohol consumption as it's water or something like this. There is no amount of alcohol that is healthy for our brain. And this is just one example. There's another example of a couple who went to numerous counselors because they were on the brink of divorce. The wife said the guy was a jerk, but the reason why they kept bouncing around to different therapists is because, the last therapist had fired them before they ended up at Amen clinics. And they didn't really want to get a divorce, right? But they couldn't figure out how to live together because the guy was just a jerk. And so he got scanned. He went to Amen Clinics, got scanned, and his brain looked like he was consuming alcohol. And the wife said, no, he doesn't drink alcohol. I know. And, uh, what they ended up finding out was that this guy works in in some chemical factory where they make like furniture and stuff like this. And the time that he started acting irritable, aggressive, and angry, and just being an all around jerk to his wife was around the time he was put on this part of the factory line to do his work. Those chemicals affected his brain and caused this disturbance in his marriage. So in order to fix the marriage, what he had to do, he had to go back to work and ask for a reassignment, right? But I would say not only, so that's where it's a story, a testament to how chemicals impact the brain and can manifest in our relationships without us even knowing it. The reason they found out is because they did a brain scan and, was asked a series of questions to get to the bottom of it, to get to the root cause. But it's not just these outside chemicals that do it. It's also the foods that we talked earlier about sugar, how that can make you anxious, how that could make you, irritable, whatever it is it's doing to you. And there's other foods that are triggers that are inflammatory to us that is causing us to act out, right? Because we do not have the capacity, we don't have the mental resilience to deal with life because our food is not right. And, chemicals in our environment also is really major, which is why I really encourage folks to buy organic.
Excellent. All right. So in closing, do you want to share with the group any programs that you offer, or if they want to work with you? And I'll put your website in the chat. And I will be speaking with Sam further about how HeartSmarts can work with her in a group setting, but she also does offer individual programs as well.
Yes, if any of this resonated with you, I know you're going on this 30-day raw vegan journey. If you end up at the end of it, or even now feeling like you need additional support, one-on-one support, I offer coaching, and I work with people for 6 months. We meet together every 2 weeks, and it's almost like therapy meets nutrition counseling all in one. Because we work a lot on obstacles, mindset shifts, a lot of what we talked about today, but things come up in people's lives. Like, I had this family event, or, the kids came over, they brought this, I don't know what to do. I need to get off rice. I don't know how to get off rice. How do I get off bread? What do I do as a transition? So you get personal guidance, you get expert knowledge, because I've been in this, like, my business was a raw food business, offering juicing, supporting the community for so long. And I've been coaching since 2015. So I've been doing this for a while, and I also have lived experience, and you get accountability. So it just helps to ease the transition. Of course, I provide nutritional education, but I like to maintain our coaching calls for coaching specifically. Coaching is a lot like the stories that I mentioned in the last two. How did they get to the root cause of this issue? Mostly the last one with the couple. You have to sit with somebody and get to the root of the problem, because a lot of times, when you go to the doctor's office and stuff like that, something's coming up, they only have 5 minutes to talk to you. We have a whole 60 minutes to dig into what's going on. I do a whole health history. What medications are you taking? You've had issues releasing this excess fat, and you're doing all these things. Why? We can pinpoint, maybe some things in the meals, maybe it could be the medication, your exercise, and we go through all of this. And most of the people I work with, they have targeted weight loss goals. And so if you are interested in this, interested in that level of support, then you could definitely book a consultation with me at rawfoodmealplanner.com. All the info is there. And hopefully I look forward to meeting you all and working with you soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam. This was amazing. And we thank you for being so generous with your time, sharing your story with us, giving us
Can I add
advice.
one
Go
point?
ahead.
Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, I saw Karen dropped in the chat. What if someone wants to gain weight? And yes, I have a 30-day raw vegan challenge where I go through everything you could ever need to know or want to know about the raw food lifestyle. And I'm pretty sure you're going to learn a lot on this 30-day experience that you're doing with HeartSmarts. But you can gain weight on a raw food diet, raw foods will bring you to a normalized weight, right? So some people are underweight because they are undernourished. Some people are overweight because they are undernourished. And with raw foods, you get hypernourishment, so you get to your healthy weight range. Now, once you're in your healthy weight range, there are tweaks you can make if you're trying to build muscle, or if you just want to, get to a certain weight, you're trying to release excess fat. Whatever the goal is, there are ways to get there, and I support my clients in that through coaching.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that too. And thank you for everything you shared with us this evening. We look forward to having you back with us, and welcome to the HeartSmarts family. For those of you who will be continuing in this series, next week we have the amazing Lena Roth joining us, and she's from Pure Vegan Food. That's her company, and she'll be doing testimonials similar to Sam, but also sharing additional tips about the Living Foods lifestyle. And she'll be doing a cooking demo, or I shouldn't say cooking, food prep demo for us for raw foods. She will be doing staples that we should have on hand to make sure that we are able to get through a typical day. So that'll be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. If you signed up for this, then you'll get the Zoom link for that. For those of you who are in the HeartSmarts Raw Foods program, I sent you the link. We'll just have a quick touch base after this. So it's a different Zoom link. You should have it in your email. In addition to that, the quiz questions or the points that you took from this meeting with Sam, that's open as well, so you can enter your answers into that. And I think that's everything. If you want to be part of the Raw Foods program and you didn't consider it before, you can send me an email. All right, so thank you again so much, Sam. And I'm going to just have the participants unmute so we can give you a round of applause for your amazing presentation this evening. So thank you very much.
So much.
Thank
It was
you.
very
Thank you
informative.
very much.
So very much.
Very informative.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Excellent,
you.
excellent.
That was great. Excellent. That was very good.
Thank you.
That was
Thank
very
y'all.
good. Thank you so much.
Okay, good
So
night.
much.
Good
Thank
luck
you.
on your journey. You can do it.
Good night.